This is Gemara and Eruvin Daf Kuf Beis. Tonight's shir should be a schos for Shem Yidmir Ben Akir Men Ben Chaim Chaim and Sarsh Sim Reizes Over Baskin Endol It Basim B'Chai Sarsh Chaim and Saras Yosel Ben Middle Yosef Ben Shavlei Shem Basabi Bashavigim Jichan Avodav Nita Riva Liva Bracha Basayba Musa. And a special for Shlema who needs a refuah Bekarev Avram Si Ben Masha Esther B'Seishar Chali Yisrael. We close in on Eruvin Baruch Hashem a few more days, and a few people have been asking about a siyum. Mirtzam, we will be having a siyum. It will have to be virtually for most of us. Details, it'll be at the end of next week to give people a few extra days they need to catch up. Let's pick it up on the bottom of Kuf Aleph Amud Beis. Continuing, bit of random dinim, bit of dinim of Haitzah, bit of dinim of Baina, and some other fascinating sugyos coming up today. Says the Gemara on the bottom of Kuf Aleph Amud Beis, Nagar sheyesh b'roishay glustra. We have a nagar, we have a bolt, we're still in that door, we're still locking up that door, has a bolt that has a knob at the end of it. Rashi says this glustra is like a kli. It's sort of like a pestle. It's something that's a kli. Rav Lezer Eiser, you're not allowed to use it to close the door. Rav Yesi Mater, Rav Yesi says you're yes allowed to use it. Amar Rav Lezer, Amar Rav Eliezer, I'm sorry. Ma'aseh Knesset Tiberia, there was a story with the shul in Tiberia, that they were makel. Ashbar Rav Gamliel Bazakinim, so Rav Gamliel Bazakinim came to Asr and he said it's forbidden. Rav Yesi Omer Isser Nagubai, they just were noig, they are accustomed to be Asr. But Rav Gamliel Bazakinim Ve'atir Lahem. So we have conflicting stories whether Rav Gamliel came to be machmir on them or whether Rav Gamliel came to be makel on them. And again, the more important here, as you see in Rashi, is that this cholesterol, as you see in the 4 lines from the bottom, Rashi says that it's something that can be used as a kli, and still, even though it has a Torah's kli, and it still, Rav Lezer says it is forbidden. And again, this again has to do with, like Rashi points out, even though it's tied in the door, it has to do with, does it have an appearance of building? Is there a mechzi kebaina when you take this bolt and use it to lock up the door? Says the Gemara, b'nitel igdai, in a case that the bolt, this nagar that we're talking about, is tied on with a cord. It's tied tightly to the door. Kuli amaloi pligi, no one disagrees. Everyone agrees that it's not a problem because it does not have appearance of building when this lock, this deadbolt, whatever it was, is tied on with a strong rope to the door that it does not get severed. Ki pligi, when is there a machlekes? Moving along to when it doesn't have a strong rope, and when you take it, the rope snaps. And that is the machlekes. Do we say because it has this knob in the end, because it is a vessel at some use of some level, therefore you're allowed to use it? Does not appear like building. At the end of the day, it's going to be forbidden because since it's not tied on tightly, it appears like it's pointing when you put this item in. Says the Mishnah, another case. Nagar, we have this bolt, hanigrar, that drags along. We're going to have to see in the Gemara what exactly that means. Says the Mishnah, noilin b'ayim mikdash. In the Beis HaMikdash, you're allowed to use this bolt. Avalei b'Medina, not outside the Beis HaMikdash. V'amunach, and if it's sitting off of the door, it's not connected at all. Kan v'kan aser. Rav Yudah says, Rav Yudah hamunach mutter. If it's not attached, then it's allowed. B'mikdash in the Beis HaMikdash. V'anigra b'Medina. If it is dragging, then it's going to be aser b'Medina. So Rashi over here, first of all, points out, I should say that better. V'anigra b'Medina, and Rav Yudah is the exact opposite. Rav Yudah says when it drags, then it's going to be mutter. So again, hamunach, when it's not contended, not attached, meaning give a separate bolt, then Rav Yudah says it's only mutter in the Beis HaMikdash. When it drags, then it's mutter even outside the Beis HaMikdash. What's this Beis HaMikdash? So Rashi here points out a famous din. Says Rashi, Noilan by B'Mikdash, the second Rashi, the Shvos Ba'almu, it's an Isser D'Rabbanan. The Eloi by Namamish, it's not real building, Hoyel V'Kosher L'Kas, since it's tied on, Elohoyel V'Nigra Mechzi Ke'Baina, those important words in Rashi again, Ve'ein Shvos D'Rabbanan B'Mikdash L'Kazu Sham, and the Beis HaMikdash is no problem doing Yisuri D'Rabbanan, and therefore says the Gemara, in the case where it's going to be D'Rabbanan, it'll be mutter in the Beis HaMikdash. Says the Gemara, D'Rabbanan, what is this bolt that drags? Shenoilin b'mikdash, you're allowed to use in the Beis HaMikdash. Apologies. What is this bolt that drags? You're allowed to use the Beis HaMikdash. Avalei b'Medina, but not outside the Beis HaMikdash. Literally the provinces. Kol shekasher v'tolui. If it's tied on and the bolt is hanging there, you have this dead bolt. It's tied onto the door and it's hanging there. V'rosh echad megil haaretz, on one end of it sitting on the ground. That is the case that we're discussing. Rav Yehuda Omer, that will be the case. That will be mutter in the Beis HaMikdash, and it will be also outside of the Beis HaMikdash. That is the first part of the Mishnah. Comes along Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda says, that case, when you have that bolt that's tied on, af b'Medina mutter, even in outside the Beis HaMikdash is mutter. So what says Rav Yehuda? Eleizeu nager shenoilin b'Mikdash. What is the case that it's specifically only used in the Beis HaMikdash? Avaloi b'Medina, kol she'enai lo'kasher v'loi toloi. Says Rav Yehuda, in the case you have the bolt, it's not tied, it's not hanging. You have a Karen's office, you have this bolt, and you take off the bolt and you sit in a corner. That's the case that Yehuda learns is an Isser D'Rabbanan, and that's the case you can be making in the Beis HaMikdash. Whereas the Tanakama, of course, learned that in that case, there's a real Isser, and therefore you cannot do that anywhere. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda, Mershmo, important thing to remember for the latter Gemara, Alacha, Ki Rav Yehuda. We paskin like Rav Yehuda in this last case, Benigrar, when it drags, we're going to be Mikol, even outside of the Beis HaMikdash, because he holds there's no issue at all. Amar Rava, Vusha Kasher Bedelis. Rava says, slow down. It drags, fine, but it has to be tied on. If it's not tied on, then of course it's going to be a D'Rabbanan, says Rava, and even Rav Yehuda would not be Mikol in that case. Says Gemara, 1 second, ain't is that true? But Rabbi Tavla, Ikla the Mechuza, he came to Mechuza, and he saw a certain bolt that was hanging from the bar, the dasha of the door, and not hanging from the door itself. And he didn't say any issue. Meaning, Rava came along and Rava said, Busha Kasher, Bideles, that has to be tied on the door itself, not on the door frame, like you see in Rashi over here. Rashi points out, Busha Kasher, Bideles, Atzma, Demuchach Shabav, Loisha Kasher, Bimizuzah, says Rashi, and not when it's tied into the mezuzah. The mezuzah is the doorpost, hence the name mezuzah, that goes in the doorpost. So ask the Gemara, 1 second. Here was a story that there was this bolt that was tied onto the bar, not on the door itself, and yet they did not say anything. Answers the Gemara, oh, nital be'igdai. That case, again, nital be'igdai, it was a case where it was tied on tightly, that it doesn't sever at all, and therefore in that case we're going to be makel, even when it's tied onto the door frame and not the door itself. Again, a little bit of difficult concepts because we don't really have these mitzvahs, but the point is, we have to somehow make it, remove the stigma of building. So one way is it's tied on the door, it's attached to the door. Rav Yehuda is more lenient and he allows it. Even in the case that it's dragging, Rava says it has to be tied on. But says the Gemara, if it's tied on with a really, really strong rope, then we'll be lenient even when it's tied onto the door frame. Again, because it's not going to have that stigma of building because it's tied on so tightly. Says the Gemara, Rav Avya Iklay L'Ardai. Another story. He went to Ardai, and what happened with him? He saw a person that was caught there. We know that means that he was tying, he was fastening, begemi with a reed. Amar din loy nitrak. He said this door cannot be used. Why can it not be used? Because he was using a gemi, a reed. Are reeds strong items? Of course not. It breaks with the greatest of ease. So says Rava, very good, you're tying it on. You're tying it on with a loose string, this heavy bolt. It's going to fall right off. Therefore, it appears like Baina and it is Aser. Bayi Rav Zira asked, Nikmaz Zamahu. What is the story with the nikmaz? What's a nikmaz? Rashi explains it's a deadbolt. It's a bit of machlekes. We show him exactly what the nikmaz is, but Pashim Shan and Rashi, it's a deadbolt that is a vertical deadbolt that goes into the ground like this, and then Rashi explains that it goes all the way into the ground, and that is the reason why it's potentially more chamer, as we'll see in the Gemara. Let's just find the Rashi. Rashi over here says, Nikmaz ma'u shenichnas hanigrar hanagar bechor. It goes in a hole, a scoop of the lentil, of that caramelous area, of that threshold. V'nivchaz oisei achor v'yoisei hanagar l'sara karka. V'noyit bekarka. Sounds like you're taking this bolt, and you're going into the threshold, all the way through the threshold, all the way into the ground, and therefore the Gemara wants to know, maybe this is going to be more chamer. What is your question? Did you not hear the Tanya that we learned in a Brisa? Nishmat, Osir, Nikmaz, Mutter. What did the Brisa say? The Brisa said if this bolt is Nishmat, that the string that it's attached with rips, then it's forbidden. Like we keep on seeing, it has to be attached. Nikmas, but if it goes all the way in, then mutter. Rav Yehuda Aimer, then this Bryce Rav Yehuda comes along and he says nikmas. In this case, the bolt that goes into the ground, aval bisha einay nishmat aser. Rav Yehuda takes the opposite extreme. Rav Yehuda says, even if it's not detached at all, it's fully attached, it's still going to be forbidden. Rav Yehuda, like we saw before, the same Rav Yehuda, Rav Shmuel. They were passing like Rav Yehuda bin Nikmas, in this case of the Nikmas, this case of the dead bolt that goes all the way to the ground. But time am I, what's the reason? I'm Rabbi Mishom, because it appears like Baina, and that is the reason why we're going to forbid this act, because it appears like Baina. And again, just to give one idea that we've seen already, it's going to come in the Gemara soon, that we all know that putting things in the ground is much more chamer. Baina bekarka, as we spoke about many times, we'll speak about more on base, is much more chamer. So says the Gemara over here, this dead bolt, true by the door when it went in horizontally, we weren't as machmir. But once it goes in vertically and it goes all the way down, it goes into the ground, we're going to have to be more machmir. 4 lines before the white lines, okay, we got this bolt. What if we make the boat, we make a handle on the boat? Sort of like those old school bars, that's what I'm envisioning, that you have this bar that moves and has a handle on it. So the question is, maybe now that it has a handle, it doesn't have the same appearance as Baina. Rashi says it's more like a kli. Perhaps this now can be used for other functions, etc. Amrle, buchla gamrit. You're asking about a buchla? You're asking about a pestle? That's what it sounds like. It's a regular pestle, regular kli. It's about, excuse me. It's about we learned Amram Nachumi Varados LaBeis Yad Mutter. Then it's going to be permitted. It's not going to have that sigma of building. Hausharita Davi Beira Padas. There was a beam, a tremendous beam in the house of Rabbadas Dave Madli Asara that it took 10 people to pick up this tremendous beam. Vishadu La Adasha on the first white line, and they used to take this beam and they would shove it in against the door to hold the door closed. They wanted to know, you allowed to do this, and they didn't say anything to them. Amar Tayras Kli Allah is the din of a Kli. Din of a Kli, you're allowed to move it on Shabbos. This is one of the big Marmakaimis. Hilchas Muksa, Simon Shinches, if Beis, heavy items are not necessarily Muksa. Something we've spoken about extensively. We spoke about couches and tables and break fronts. The weight itself does not make a Muksa. Back then we mentioned, but of course, if it's going to be something that you're very, very careful with, you're never going to move it, that's a different reason it's going to be Muksa. Muksa Machlasar and Kiss. But the weight itself is not a reason to make it Muksa. The second white line, Hu Asita. There was a mortar of the Ave Beis of Shmuel, the house of Mar Shmuel, at the riba, that this mortar would what? It would hold, it would machzekis, it was the quantity that it was able to hold at the riba was a certain quantity called the lesech. Shari Mar Shmuel Mishdei Ayu Adasha. He allowed them to use it to lean against the door. Amar Tayres Kli Alei has a Tayres Kli on it. This is a very important din. Yesterday we mentioned if someone has a broken window, you're not allowed to take a piece of wood and plug it up because that's a din that it looks like baina and it's the rabbanan. But when you want to use a kli to close it up, then it's going to be mutter. Similar to what we're seeing over here, that all these items have a Tayras kli on it. Therefore, you're allowed to close the door with it. So too, if you have a broken window and you want to take, a fruit crate, and you want to use the crate to plug up the window, that would be allowed, says Rosh Zalman, because you're certainly going to take it away and it does not have the appearance of building. Moving right along the third white line, Shalach Le Rabbi Bar Yecheskel, the Rav Amma, the Rav Amram, I'm sorry. Nimalon Mar, please tell us. Mahalin mili mal yisa. Tell us something wonderful. Damar la mishmei. De Ravasi bekipi. That you heard from Ravasi in a wonderful place called Kipi Darba in the Kipi, which is the arches of the boat. Shalach le achim Ravasi. Ravasi says, Hani Kipi Darba. These arches of the boat. Bezache ben tefach. Ish ben tefach. When is the tefach between the arches? And we'll show a picture of this boat in 1 second. Then that's going to be one din. Inami in ben tevach, or if it's not a tevach, then being shleisha. Like we've seen many times, it doesn't have 3 tvachim, so we say lavud. That's going to all be one din. Lamacher, what's the din the next day? Maybe machatzeles ubayres aleihem. Because since it's separated very close together, there's a din that it's connected. So the next day you let it bring a machzeles, you let it bring a mat and drape it over. My time. Oh, moisiv al oyal arayu. Vishaber dami. Very, very important words. Once you have an oyal araya temporary oil. We've spoken many times. You can't create roofs, you can't create temporary structures. But once you have a roof, you're allowed to extend that roof. So like we see here in this picture, this has the halachic status of a roof, because each of those pieces are between 1 and 3. So love it closes them up on the top of the roof. So once it's halachically a roof, you could drape over a blanket or something or reed mat on top of it. Says the Gemara, a similar story. There were these rams. Ravuna had a bunch of rams. Maybe a mama in the daytime, Bali Tula. What do these rams need during the day? They need a shade for the sun. We need to take off the shade so they can breathe. So how do we have a situation when you're asking the Gemara that we could create basically a canopy on Shabbos? Also, again, the same, basically the same premise that we said a moment ago. Go roll up a mat, and leave a tefach over. Lamachar pashta. Then tomorrow you could spread it out. And that is the halacha lemaisa. Anytime you have a tefach open, which is the reason a lot of the awnings, a lot of the canopies, a lot of the stroller hoods, once it's a tefach open, then you could go and extend it. Is mutter. We see many times that we have a V-line, a canopy bed. You're allowed to yes put it up and yes to take it down on Shabbos. Sorry, I jumped the gun. The Kils Chasanim is the canopy bed and Mutzla Fargal does it Shabbos. The V-line was just a canopy, a tapestry. You let it hang up a tapestry on Shabbos. Case number 1. Case number 2 is how to create this canopy bed. What everyone's anticipating, if you remember, Slingmar and Shabbos, that's only if the roof, it's a slanted roof and it doesn't have a tefach at the top. We'll show a picture in a moment. If it comes to a point, not a point, if it comes to a tefach at the top, it's going to be forbidden. And furthermore, when it doesn't have a tefach, within the top 3 from the roof, it also can't have a tefach. Because if within the top 3 it has a tefach, then we view it that it's a roof, and that's going to be forbidden. It's going to be aser. And lastly, number 3 qualification. And still in that case, we don't say it. Ella she'ein b'shipua. If on the slant, on the diagonal as well, does not have a tefach. But if the slant itself has a tefach, then shipua oilim ka'oilim dami, the slant of a tent, the sloping sides, is going to be considered an oil, and therefore that would be reason unto itself that is forbidden. Let's quickly pull up a picture over here. Here is your canopy bed, and here you see is that it comes to a point, there's not a tefach of space at the top. Says the Gemara. But the case that we're talking about is that the top 3 cannot equal tefach, as you see so beautifully in this picture, because if it did, we'd view it like a roof, and that would also be forbidden. And here is the bottom again of a tefach, and this is actually an interesting picture. We've never shown this when we showed the pictures in the past. It's very important to see this, because this is how Rashi learns the Gemara. I think we might have mentioned back then that how can the world, can you sleep in this teeny tiny little bed, has to be less than a tefach wide between the center. How can you sleep in there? So Rashi learns you have many of these next to each other, and you can make quite a party there, quite a big bed. Says the Gemara, now another halacha. V'amar Shishi, a lot of these halachas we learned the Gemara in Shabbos. V'amar Shishi b'rei Rav Idi, siyana, that sun hat, that felt hat, shari, you're allowed to wear it. Vatanya, also you're not allowed to wear a felt hat, a sun hat on Shabbos. Lo ikasha, this be tefach, let's be tefach. The difference is the brim a tefach big? If the brim is a tefach, then it's an oil. It's being making, it's protecting you. El me'ata says the Gemara, shari b'klimi tefach, ochinami daser. If I take my coat, I take my towels, I throw it over a head, and it's sticking over in the front of the tefach, it's also going to be forbidden. Lo ikasha, had mahadik, had lo mahadik. One is where it's taught. When you take your towels, you take your coat, and you throw it over your head. It's not taught, it flaps in the front. So it's mutter. But your hat, which is taught, it's going to be a problem. And it does, this is brought down in Shulchan Aruch, but at some level it does seem the minhag of oilam is to be makel. There are people who do have wide brims hats. Actually, it's interesting. I was listening to a shir from 7 years ago in the Daf Yomi, and the Maggid shir said, it seems like the minhag's makel, everyone has such a wide brim hat. Nowadays, most of the hats are definitely not a tefach. They're quite small, the brims. Maybe a baseball cap perhaps, but that would be the issue of being a potential oil, as it is protecting the person that is wearing it. Let's continue. Says the Mishnah, Machzirin Sira Tachtin B'Mikdash. Back to doors. You're allowed to replace the Sira Tachtin, the bottom pivot. You have these different pivots, these different hinges of sorts in the door. You'll have to replace the bottom one in the base hamikdash of Aloy Medina, and we know what that means. That means it's an Issa Rabbanan. So the base hamikdash is mutter, outside the base hamikdash is aser. But the top pivot, kan v'kan aser, is more of an Issa. It's more of an Issa deraisa to put in that top peg. Therefore, it's always forbidden. Rav Yehuda Aimer again being bar mekel elyon b'mikdash v'tachton b'medina. The elyon is a din Rabbanan. It says Rav Yehuda, he bumps everyone down. Therefore, it's mutter in the base hamikdash. The tachton is going to only be mutter in the outside the base hamikdash. Says the Gemara, Tan Rabbanan, Seer, you have this hinge of dells of a door, sheet of a box, teva, a migdal of a tower, b'migdash machzirin b'medina, but in the outside of the base of migdash, you could push it in. Va'elyain kan v'kan lo yachzir gezeir shema yitaka. Big words. Says the Gemara, why is it aser? Not because the act you're doing. Again, let's not get stuck on the details of the door. Says the Gemara, whatever you're doing over here, whatever this hinge, whatever this piece you're popping back in, that itself is not a problem. But it's still aser. You know why? Gezeira shema yitaka. We're afraid you're going to come to put it in tight. Therefore, it is a bin. Vim taka chayiv chatas. It's mean it's the raisa. Let's pause for one moment. We don't have much time, but this is a tremendous discussion, a tremendous debate, tremendous halacha and Hilchos Shabbos, is that when you're never allowed to put something in tight. Now, definitely not to put in a screw, and even a type of a clip, a type of something which clicks in tight is going to be forbidden. Because of that, anytime you put something in loosely, it's also aser gezerah. We're afraid you're going to put it in tight. Simple examples, when you have a glasses, big discussion, but to make just one din is if the temple falls out and you want to put the screw back in. So to screw the screw in tight, that's for sure forbidden. But let's say I'll just put it in loosely. That's also aser. Why? Gezerah shema yitaka. We disallow you, we forbid you from putting it in loosely because you might come to put it in tight. Just to give one aid so that the place can speak out, but let's say you don't have the screw, or let's say you don't have the tool to put in the screw, then it'll be mutter. There's no gezerah, you're going to come to fix it if you physically cannot fix it. And obviously the ramifications are going to be whether the entire glass has become muksa because of that. So say the baiskim, let's say you lose the screw, you lose the tool, and you have no way of properly fixing it, then you'll be allowed to loosely just sit it there, or then at least you'll be allowed to use the rest of the glasses and they won't be muksa because you no longer could potentially fix it, so there's no gezerah shema yitaka. Let's continue. Shalbar, Shaldos, Shal Yitzia. In these cases, the difference is these are coverings of ground holes. Something that we spoke about extensively, mentioned before. Let's just pull up the Rashi. Rashi towards the bottom on the first medium-sized line says, we know that already, that when it comes to ground, we're much, much more machmir. And if you build on the ground, even one little bit, they are raisa. Therefore, when you have this hole, you have this pit, you're not allowed to cover it. We spoke about the example last time. You have a tile that moves out of place. You're not allowed to put that back in. What do you mean? It's just sitting there. What's the difference? You're sitting there on the ground. That is an isser. They are raisa. Says the Mishnah, Machzir and Mitia. We can talk about this for a long time, but we must forge on. Machzir and Ratir b'mikdash, let it return a ratia, a bandage, in the base of Mikdash, meaning it's an Isser Rabban. Avaloi b'Medina, in B'tchila, the first time you're putting on the bandage, kan v'kan aser, it's forbidden everywhere. Well, why is it aser? It's the rice to put on a bandage. Okay, so maybe certain bandages will be, so clearly you look at Rashi, this is talking about some sort of plaster bandage, which was an Isser Mimachek. To smooth out this bandage, they put this plaster type of thing on. So therefore, to put it on for the first time is a deraisa. If it's already there and you took it off, Rashi says, let's say in the base of Mikdash, it's the chatzitza, the kohanim are tochening, or let's say stam, outside the base of Mikdash, put it back on. It's in this derabanan, which will be makel in the base of Mikdash, but not outside of the base of Mikdash. Tan Rabbanan, we learned Ritia Shapir Shah, Mel Gavi Maka. We have this Ritia, this bandage that comes off of a Maka, Machzirim B'Shabbos, you'll have to return it on Shabbos. Rav Yehuda Aimer, Hochliku Lamata, if the bottom part comes off, slips off, you push it back up. Lamal, if the top comes off, you push it to the bottom. Umegalam mixes a Ritia, Umekanech B'Yad Maka. Says Rav Yehuda, you let it take it off a little bit and clean out underneath. And put it back. Umegalim mixes a Maka, Ritia, and you can put it back. Ritia Atzma, the bandage itself, lo yikanech, you cannot wipe this bandage, which shows us a bit about the bandage. It's not just a regular band-aid. Why? Because it's smoothing, and that's where we see that the bandage that's under discussion is some sort of plaster type of situation, and to smooth it as it is a daraisa, and that's the reason why you cannot do that on Shabbos. Rav Yehuda, we paskin like Rav Yehuda, that, like Rabbi Yehuda just said a moment ago, that if it slips off a little bit, then it is allowed. However, Rabbi Yehuda taught us at the end that the bandage itself you can't smooth off. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Chisda, Lo yishanu ela shebir shal gabi akli. Says Rav Chisda, this is only if the bandage falls and falls onto utensil, falls onto my stender, falls onto my Gemara. Then you'll have to put it back. Aval birsha gabi karka divrikol aser. Bandage falls down, it's on the ground. Everyone says it's aser. Rashi says why? Because that's like making it a new one. We don't make it this bandage for the first time. Whatever this type of bandage, this plaster situation is forbidden. Amar Amar says Gemara Amar Rashi. Havikamina gamidabo. I was in front of Abba. Nafle Abba Sadia. And he had this bandage that fell off. It fell onto the sadia, onto the pillow. And he put it back on in Shabbos. So I said to him, do you not hear that they said the whole debate where Rav Yehuda's machmir is when it falls onto utensil? And therefore what? Like we mentioned before. So Rav Yehuda's machmir falls on a pillow. So why are you going to take this bandage that fell on the pillow and put it back on? He argues on Rabbi Yehuda and he holds you allowed to even put it on when it falls onto the pillow.